Here's an extended quote from the Brookings Institute research. Yet apart from these conspiracy theories, unsubstantiated or false claims shared at this time were far more nuanced and primarily involved, wait for it, misunderstandings of science. Yeah.
It's quite a claim.
Several prominent podcasters carved out positions of authority during this period of high uncertainty. For example, Heather Heying and Brett Weinstein, that's us, relied on their backgrounds in evolutionary biology to amass a wide audience for their unconventional coronavirus advice. The pair repeated unproven claims about the prophylactic use of various treatments, including ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, and cast doubt on vaccine safety. Throughout their episodes, Heying and Weinstein tried to bolster perceptions of their credentials by using technical terms. In one episode, Weinstein offered a little brain teaser, saying that, quote, correlation is in fact evidence of causation if there was a causal hypothesis pre-existing the observation of the correlation, end quote. I can't even read this next part with a straight face. While it's unclear exactly what he is referencing, perhaps the most basic tenet of statistics emphasizes that correlation does not equal causation and is indeed susceptible to confounders. Although researchers can control for potential known confounders, there may be infinitely more unknown confounding variables driving any observed relationship. Rather than protecting researchers against confounding, a pre-existing hypothesis may instead make them more prone to confirmation bias. Weinstein, however, may have deployed this language to appear to burnish the scientific bona fides of the hosts for a non-technical audience. You know who's trying to burnish your scientific bona fides for the benefit of a non-technical audience? That's you, Brookings Institute, and the New York Times, and all the rest of you. You clearly have no idea what you're doing. You don't understand what a hypothesis is, and that prediction changes the baseline. Oh my God, this is so bad. I'm sorry, let me just finish reading, this is so bad. Okay, go on.
They have
so bad.
They have invalidated most of science in their claim, because what they've done is ruled out the possibility that you could test an idea by making a prediction and then seeing whether the correlation exists.
If this is true, you can't know anything, ever. There is no knowledge. There's no basis to know anything.
What's more,
what is it?
The very things that they are claiming that
the most basic tenet of statistics.
Right. But so this is a classic, midwit idiocy.
Yeah.
Right. Because the point is, you come to a level of understanding, which is correlation does not imply causation, which is shorthand for correlation alone does not imply causation.
Right.
Our brain teaser was, yes, it does imply causation when you hypothesize that there would be a correlation. The evidence is all the stronger if it is an unexpected correlation predicted only by that hypothesis, and then, lo and behold, you find it. And so the point is, these people are non-scientists misunderstanding what actual science is and deploying this syllogism without an understanding of what it even means.
And I guess I will finish the rest of this in a minute, Zach. You can take this off the screen for the moment. If the author of this report is willing to say, I don't even know what this means, but we all know, don't we, the correlation doesn't imply causation. Why is it that we are supposed to take anything that this person says, or that the people who rely on this kind of analysis, with any kind of seriousness? This is a demonstration of a failure to understand basic scientific logic.
Right.
So basic.
The most fundamental scientific logic, which is that we your observation of a pattern is not a scientific conclusion. You have to get to a hypothesis about what might cause the pattern, then you have to test that with a prediction, right? That's how you discover this. And so even their own report should collapse under this, because the whole idea that anybody knows what's true about COVID, and therefore that we can say that those other things must be false, that comes from work in which people have deployed a hypothesis and then looked for a correlation.
To be fair to these people, which I think we're being very, very fair, but they're not alone. I remember back when we were professors and I would get asked to peer review papers for journals, because this is an expectation. This is sort of part of the unpaid work of being professors that you get asked to peer review papers for various journals. And the most frequent reason that I gave to reject a paper was there's no hypothesis. If the authors want to reframe this as we collected a bunch of information and from that made an observation, and now we have a hypothesis, but it's not been tested, then they could rework what they've submitted. But in general, scientific journals don't like to publish things that don't claim to have results. If you didn't have a predictive hypothesis in the first place, then what you've collected aren't data. They're not a test of anything. And the fact that many people who are purportedly doing science don't understand the distinction means that some person at the Brookings Institute with a PhD in something political doesn't understand it. Maybe isn't that surprising, but it's going to destroy the planet. Like, this level of the combination of like deviousness and ignorance is devastating to discourse and to our sense making. Like, we cannot hope to make our way through a landscape of lots of different kinds of information coming at us if we can't put a couple of simple things in order and say, I made an observation. What are all the possible reasons that thing could be true? Okay, I've got 3 possibilities. If possibility A, let's call it a hypothesis, were true, what else would necessarily be true? That's prediction that follows from hypothesis A. Same for prediction that follows from hypothesis B and C. Okay, are these mutually exclusive? Super easy and wonderful if they are. If they're not, well, the predictions from A and B aren't mutually exclusive. But if the prediction from C is true, then we've definitely excluded those 2. And if one of these is true, we're still stuck with these 2. And on and on and on it goes, right? It's not that hard. School kills this in us, and apparently higher ed and the credentials that most of these people are walking around with completely obliterates the ability to think through basic logic. You have something to say?
I've got a couple things.
Yeah.
One of the things that we have done from the beginning on DarkHorse is build up people's scientific toolkit with principles that we rely on. I don't claim that they're necessarily finished, but there are a couple principles that belong here. One principle is every scientific paper should describe its relationship to a hypothesis. And the relationship really comes down to one of 2 things. Either it's an observation, which leads to a hypothesis, which then needs a test, or it is a test of a hypothesis that exists. Now, part of the problem, as we've talked about, is that this is all on the honor system. And one of the ways for people who are pursuing a credential or grant money to cheat is to pretend that some observation they've made was actually a test of a hypothesis that they only came up with after.
Oh, look what my data showed. Oh, I totally thought that all along. Right. Yeah. Right. This was a test of that thing that it's now shown to be true. Yep.
So the honor system is a problem here. Yep. But when done properly, you're doing there's nothing wrong with not having a pre-existing hypothesis. But the point is that says you're on step 1. You're on the observation phase.
That's right.
If you have observed and then you want to go run a test, you need a hypothesis, and you need to have that. You cannot test it with the observations you've already made. You could go back to a data set and you could look for some other pattern that you've now predicted will exist there. But you have to actually run a new test. Otherwise, it's scientifically invalid. Mm-hmm. Right? So anyway, that's the process that I don't think... You
can't go back to your own data set. Like you can look at other people's data and say,
you could query your data set for something else. You can't query it for the observation that set the process in motion. You could look for something else that you didn't know was there or not there. You could look for some other correlation. But clearly, these people do not understand the basics of how science works. And it's not, children do scientific thinking without having to be trained. They don't do it perfectly. They don't do it in a Popperian way. They're not falsificationists. But the point is, scientific thinking is natural. And as you say, it's drummed out of us by bad education.
Yep.
But these people clearly either don't know or don't care or both, right? The second piece of the toolkit I want to point out, somewhere in what you read, they do what Scott Adams calls mind reading, where they say that the reason that we have used technical terms, which they don't understand.
Weinstein, however, may have deployed this language to appear to burnish the scientific bona fides of the hosts for a non-technical audience. Is that the sentence you're after?
Yeah. First of all, for a bunch of humanities morons, that's not even good English, right? Read it again.
Weinstein, however, may have deployed this language to appear to burnish the scientific bona fides of the hosts for a non-technical audience.
Appear to burnish. What they mean is burnish. Appear to burnish is the revelation that the
and we're going to copy it at you too.
Right. So you're not even doing humanities well, and it's, that's a pretty low bar. But here's the point. What are the chances that that accusation would land on a podcast that has the following thing as a piece of toolkit which we have deployed and tried to teach our audience repeatedly?
What's that going to be?
The distinction between jargon and terms of art.
Yeah.
Now, what we say is that terms of art are a necessary evil. If you're working on something technical, you will probably need some terms that are not straightforward. This should be minimized. You want as few of those things as possible. You want them as straightforward as possible. But if you're working on technical material, it's probably not going to be zero. You're going to have to make some terms that are technical that need to be described explicitly. Jargon is the abuse of the fact that you might need technical terms to do technical work, to keep people out, to keep them from knowing what you're talking about. It is the use of unnecessarily complex language in order to limit the discussion to only insiders, right? That is not a necessary evil. That's just simply an evil. So the idea that they're going to accuse us of using language
like correlation and causation.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Hypothesis. Yeah, that's definitely us using jargon there.